Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be going over the roster changes for EUL coming into the 2023 season. Do keep in mind that these are just the changes from SI, so there may be some additional changes that have happened since Stage 3, and I'll try to mention those as we go. This graphic was made by Heno_R6 on Twitter, so not specifically made for me, but I hope he doesn't mind my using of the graphic. I do appreciate it. It's a very nice graphic. Okay, so we're just going to go down the line, Heroic first, but before that, let me mention the only the only org change, I should say, was Wild taking the spot of Na'Vi. Other than that, everyone else is the same. Virtus Pro now being allowed to play as Virtus Pro once again. Before they were playing as outsiders. I think that's all I really need to mention before we get into it. So yeah, let's get into it. Heroic, Uno and Joom, the only players being retained. They are being joined by Blaz, Kayak, and Skitty, replacing Grizzly, Noodle, and Sloth. And then Mr. Officer and Anarchic as coaches. Deville being dropped from the analyst position. So we are a few games in already to EUL, and Heroic is the top team in their group, along with Wild in their group. Pretty impressive. I don't think people were anticipating Wild to come out of the gates that hot, but Heroic, I mean, the hottest of all. They had a 7-0 and a 7-3, and I believe one of them was, I think the 7-3 was against BDS, right? The other one was like TT9, but still, 14-3 round count in the first two games, looking really, really good. Mr. Officer has done it again, thrown together a pretty good squad. Uno was rumored to be the one being dropped rather than Grizzly, but it turned out to be Grizzly. I think this makes more sense. I think a lot of people were really questioning Grizzly. Not that people don't question Uno, but what impact was Grizzly really having? Maybe more than met the eye, but no, they did finally opt to drop him. Noodle and Sloth were sort of, I guess, stand-ins for SI. Sloth, I think that was well known that he was just being brought in last minute for SI, but Noodle, I think people assumed he was going to stick around, and I don't know if it was because of his attitude issues or if because Koi wanted him more, but yeah, now he's over on Koi. So a couple of players on Heroic from Na'Vi, and actually all 5 of the Na'Vi players finding homes. Kayak and Skitty here, Jegs and Teb over on Wild, so kind of staying on the same roster, but I'll talk about that in a little bit, and then Leader going over to Koi. But all right, that does it for Heroic. Let's go over to Wolves. We have Bibu, Mowgli, P4, and Shinka being joined by Deadshot, who is replacing Rise. So Rise, a very, very long-standing member of that roster, but his time finally came. He seemed to have a certain amount of impact, but was generally always the worst performing statistical player on the roster. So it was finally time for him to go. It's probably going to make a lot of people happy, but it may be a bit bittersweet because, yeah, such a long-standing member of the team and just of the scene in general. Deadshot, a really hot prospect. Some people thought that he was maybe going to take the spot of Renshiro on BDS, and maybe that was something that was potentially going to happen, but no, he ends up going to Wolves instead, and Liloon and Helby remain as the 2 coaches. So not a lot of changes for Wolves. We'll see what they can do going forward. Next up, we have Eminem, Uzis, Nello, Tyrant, Nafe, and Solotov. No changes from SI, but going into SI, they replaced Nafe, also known as Nath, also known as Nathan. They brought him in to replace Neo. So no longer having the Neo and Nello combo, just Nello. And Julio being brought in as coach, the Julio that was just in the grand final of SI playing on W7M. Before that, he was the coach for Furia. Before that, he was a player on NIP. So the second Brazilian coach import after Twister. So actually 2 of them now, which is kind of cool. Archer Omics being dropped from the coaching position, and Eden remaining as analyst. So not a whole lot of changes for Eminem, but yeah, I guess the one roster change from Stage 3, and then the Julio Coach Edition seems huge. At least it's flashy, if nothing else. Next up, we have Koi. Leon Gids, Cryan, and Deepak remain, being joined by Noodle and Leader, who are replacing Kanto and Spoit. So also Meepy being dropped from the coaching position, Bernie and Sathis remaining as coaches. Spoit, I don't think they wanted to lose, but he got an offer he could not refuse over on M80. Little question mark here, but that question has been answered since this graphic was made. He is indeed on M80. And Kanto, they were saying they weren't going to drop, but I don't know if things changed or if they were fibbing a little bit the whole time, but no. They finally decided to drop Kanto, and that was a requested by the community kind of one. Not that the community really has much sway on what the rosters do, but it was asked for. Did find a new team though. He's over on TT9. Get there in a minute. Yeah, Noodle coming over from Heroic, Leader from Na'Vi. Pretty good looking squad overall. I don't know. Do you guys think it's an overall upgrade or downgrade? Because probably a downgrade from Spoy, probably an upgrade from Kanto. Hard to really say how it pans out overall. We'll see where they place by the end of the stage. Next up, we have Team Secret, Slebin, Astro, Savage, and Grubby being joined by YZN and taking the place of Kendrew Uper as a 6th. So you'll notice on some of them in parentheses, we have the S, which is substitute. So Uper a little bit more than a substitute. He is a 6th, fully intended to probably play at some point. I believe in the place of Astro, should he have health concerns that I don't really want to go into here. But I think I've also heard that people thought YZN was going to be the sub, but that'd be weird because he's the IGL. So not 100% sure on the situation there. I don't think Upers had to step in just yet, but maybe it will happen in the future. Pretty much the same roster. I think isn't with Kendra on there, I believe. Let me double check. That was the same roster that was playing in stage 3 and also in the quals, right? Slevin, Kendrew, yeah. Okay, so not a ton of changes there. Twister still as the coach, the other Brazilian coach, as I was mentioning before. And then we have TT9, sort of the big one because they swapped out their entire team. Technically, Emission still there as a sub, but no, they get Gisla, Noah, Prano, Kanto, and Kendrew in place of Emission, Karzeka, FMX, Scyther, and WTG. Going into SI quals, I think, and I guess they didn't even make it to closed quals, right? They just played in the open quals, but they replaced 2 of their players. Let me double check that one. I have it over on the side here. Yeah, they had Scyther, Emission, and WTG, but they also had Nico and Exodus, and they replaced Nico and Exodus with FMX and Karzeka, but now they're all being replaced anyways. Razor GM being dropped as coach, and Leonski being brought on as coach, Freck or Freak, whichever it is, on as sub. Originally was supposed to be on the playing roster, but I think last minute they opted to pick up Kanto when they knew he was available, sort of similar to what happened on Beast Coast where Tristan was supposed to play, but they decided to go with Vertical last minute instead when they found out he was available. So that's the new TT9. And next up, and I suppose finally in terms of changes, although a few changes down here since stage 3, so we'll mention those. Wild being brought in as an org to replace Navi. So it says Jags and Teb are being retained. That's because they went from Navi to Wild. Aces and Hungry are basically the two players being retained by Wild, and Hungry hasn't even been around for that long. Aces was on the roster even back when they played in the Saudi Arabian tournament, the Gamers 8, right? And I guess he's the only player still around from then. They had like Corey and was Gisla on the roster at that time, and then a few other players who I cannot remember the name of, but completely different roster. And I think a lot of people were questioning it, maybe particularly the Pack Bowl pickup, because Secret had him and they dropped him, they brought him back and all this stuff. But I mean, they've done well so far. They're currently top of their group, Heroic top of the other group. And I guess I'll just say it formally. Yeah, they have Jegs, Teb, and then Aces, Hungry, and Pack Bowl replacing Kayak, Leader, and Skitty. But again, if you look at it another way, it's Aces and Hungry being joined by Jegs, Teb, and Packbull, whatever you want to call it. But either way, it's 2 players from Navi or 2 players from Wild, and then Packbull coming from whatever this team is. All right, yeah, Kayak, Leader, and Skitty being dropped, 2 of them going over to Heroic, and then Leader going over to Koi. So similar to NA, there's a lot of players that are being dropped, but going over to other teams. I don't think there's too many players that were just dropped besides the TT9 players, right? Pretty much everybody else sort of just found Grizzly and Sloth as well. So there were a handful, but there were also a ton of players that were just swapping around teams. And we'll see who that plays in the favor of. And then finally down here we have Virtus Pro, BDS, and G2. None of them making changes since SI. BDS and G2 actually at SI. Virtus Pro just played in the quals. They have Pasha always, Dan, Joystick, and Shepard. But recently they brought back Joystick and Shepard to replace Milan and Rask, right? And a lot of people were speculating it would be Milan that they would keep rather than Pasha, but I mean, it's worked out fairly well. I believe they've only had the 1 game, but it was against G2, the current reigning world champions, and they did take him down. It was close. It was an 8-6 win, but a win nonetheless. And then Jekka and Viking as coach and analyst there. BDS, we have Renshiro, Shaiko, Alems, Bride, and Leakafek with Stuflex as coach, Eaglemees as analyst. No changes recently. I guess going a little ways back, Rafal replaced by Leakafek, but that was quite some time now. And then G2, we have Virtue, Doki, Alamau, Blur, and Benjamaster. Fabian as coach, Titan as analyst. I think Titan joined between stage 3 and SI, and Benjamaster, same thing, replacing Citizen. So I believe that's everything. I'm hoping I didn't miss anything. If I did, I mean, feel free to leave it below, but seeing as though I'm the one informing you guys for the most part, maybe you wouldn't know if I missed something. But I'm just a little bit less knowledgeable about EU than I am NA, so it's entirely possible I missed a little bit of context perhaps, but I think I have a pretty good grasp over all of it. Anyways, yeah, that's going to do it for this one. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, any of that stuff, feel free to leave it below. A like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. And with all that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.